This video essay evaluates the arguments posed in the debate between whether Astarion is Cazador 2.0 or not. The phrasing, Cazador 2.0, originates from a conversation at camp between Astarion and the player after his ascension. This essay will question the validity of that phrase in light of Astarion's character, Cazador's rules, and even Cazador's master, Vellioth's lessons. The cycle of abuse. Before trying to draw parallels and contrasts between Ascended Astarion and Cazador, it's important to understand why the term Cazador 2.0 is mentioned in a dialogue choice to begin with. The reason for this is that an important theme in Astarion's story is the cycle of abuse and its perpetuation. This is hinted to the players by the existence of not just Cazador being abusive towards Astarion, but the existence of Cazador's abusive master, Vellioth. Furthermore, the existence of this theme is explicitly made clear in the story when Astarion, choosing not to ascend, admits that the player saw it in him to end the cycle of abuse that had perpetuated for centuries. Being able to use the term Cazador 2.0 after Astarion's ascension proves that the cycle has not been broken and might continue to exist through him. Some dialogues within the game even suggest that the spawn player becomes to Astarion what Astarion was to Cazador. Also, it should be noted that the dialogue options in Baldur's Gate serve a few purposes. Firstly, that dialogue options in Baldur's Gate 3 aim to emulate the freedom and flexibility of playing traditional Dungeons & Dragons, where players interact with the dungeon master who responds dynamically to their actions and dialogue choices. This diversity in dialogue options, ranging from calculated responses to unhinged ones, serves the purpose of recreating the immersive experience of D&D gameplay, where players feel empowered to shape the narrative and express themselves within the game world. At the same time, another purpose of the dialogue options within the game is to serve as a tool for storytelling. It is this purpose that helps us understand the world of Baldur's Gate 3 better, and one that most of the inferences in this video is based on. And to provide a better background, the rules being discussed in this video are rules of vampiric existence mentioned during different parts of the gameplay. Vellioth's rules are exposed when exploring Cazador's palace, and Cazador's rules are explained during a dream Astarion has in his origin run.
Thou shalt know that thou art mine.
Vellioth's lessons. Before we move on to Cazador's rules, it is important that we look at Vellioth's lessons. This is because a dialogue choice by Astarion suggests that Cazador copied and derived his rules from his master, Vellioth's. Vellioth's first lesson is to always dominate and allow none to be your equal. This is a rule that leads Cazador to treat those around him as inferior. In the case of Astarion, Cazador belittles and demeans him by calling him his pet, imperfect, and a weak, pathetic boy who never amounted to anything. Similarly, Ascended Astarion tries to assert control over the romanced player and doesn't allow them to be his equal. While Astarion hasn't been outright demeaning and even calls the player flowery terms like beautiful and perfect, an insight check reveals that Astarion thinks that the player is degrading themselves by staying with him.
He will always see you as degrading yourself if you continue to be with him.
A contrast to this is Spawn Astarion, who, after choosing not to ascend, says that he sees the player as his equal. Similarly, when Cazador once broke this rule of Vellioth's and confided in a friend, he was forced to watch Vellioth drain his friend dry. Vellioth's second lesson is that power comes from solitude. To share with others is to be weak, fail, and die. This once again ties in with treating others as inferiors. Furthermore, the players are told that Cazador had once rebelled against this rule, which led him to be impaled for 11 years. This is akin to Astarion being buried alive for a year by Cazador.
Complete solitude after being disobedient, sealed, buried alive, voiceless. Will this be forever? A year of horror, then the release. He will never disobey again.
I imagine Cazador thinks he went easy on Astarion by not impaling him for 11 whole years. It can be inferred that this, as well as previous horrific experiences, makes Cazador lean towards loneliness and isolation.
These deathless dreams hold memories of a mortal life once forgotten. Of the boy I was, the man I became, the monster that will not end. I sleep but cannot rest, I live, but cannot die. I am eternal, and I grieve.
Huh, so someone as cold-hearted as Cazador once had dreams and a friend he could confide in. It's almost as if monsters are born from the choices we make. A parallel with Astarion here occurs after breaking up with his Ascended version. At the epilogue party, he admits that he is lonely in the Crimson Palace, but he is sure that he is not as lonely as his former lover. The third and final lesson is to act not in haste. The players are then told about how during the rite of perfect slaughter, Cazador killed Vellioth and proceeded to take everything he owned from him. Similarly, when Astarion ascends, he kills Cazador in the rite of profane ascension and goes on to steal the castle and Cazador's status for himself. This is in contrast to Spawn Astarion, who burns the Crimson Palace down in a particular ending.
Oh, didn't you hear? It burned. Every sin-stained furnishing, every last trace of Cazador. It all burned.
In a nutshell, Ascended Astarion has applied each of Vellioth's lessons and may as well be considered Vellioth 3.0. By the way, if you're enjoying the video, then consider liking and subscribing for more videos like these. Cazador's rules. Before we move on to each of Cazador's rules, I find it imperative to first explain that Astarion may not superficially seem like Cazador in the following rules, and this is because Astarion employs them in a different manner. Also, the parallels do start treading into a bit of a grey area when considering some of the following rules. The first rule is, "Thou shalt not drink the blood of thinking creatures," for which I couldn't find a parallel quite yet, so we will have to count this rule as an exception. The second rule says that "Thou shalt obey me in all things." Astarion follows this rule when the Spawn player asks whether he can compel them. He dodges the question instead by saying,
Why would I need to? You're going to be wonderfully obedient.
Some people miss this detail as a comparison because they attribute the dialogue to his playfulness or love. This misconception occurs because Astarion isn't as blunt as Cazador.
Imperfect, weak, pathetic little boy who never amounted to anything.
Instead, he uses flowery words and presents these rules not as commands, but as the player's own choice through a layer of romantic implications. He knows how to subtly get what he wants from the player, because manipulation and flattery are his skills. He even employs this tactic by using terms like consort instead of spawn when the player asks him what will happen to them. This is not to say that Ascended Astarion doesn't love the player, quite the contrary. Both versions of Astarion love the player in their own unique ways, in accordance with their character development.
Yes, my treasure. I don't intend to die. If you don't, ask me anything, and it will be yours. Eterna amantes, lovers forever, until the world falls down.
The third rule states, "Thou shalt not leave my side unless directed." Once again, Astarion subtly suggests this rule by saying,
Just don't stray too far. But you'd never dream of doing that, would you?
framing it like a choice instead of an order. However, there is an exception to this rule in one of the endings where the player romances Ascended Astarion and he allows them to go to Avernus with Karlach. So this makes it hard to say how serious he is about enforcing these specific rules. The final rule states, "Thou shalt know that thou art mine," which easily enough draws a parallel to Ascended Astarion's possessive dialogues.
Thou shalt know that thou art mine.
Don't be stupid, darling. You're mine. Remember, the tadpole is gone, which means your future is mine to decide.
So, in terms of Cazador's rules, 2 out of 4 seamlessly apply to Ascended Astarion. It's possible Astarion's approach to vampirism, combining both Cazador's and Vellioth's rules, suggest his own rules of vampiric existence. Other similarities. Apart from the lessons and rules, there are other similarities between Astarion and Cazador exemplified in the following clips.
I felt so very little for so long. My edges dulled over the numb years rotting into boudoir and kennels. I shall drink every drop of your blood, own your body, kill your mind. I would, and I will. You will be consumed, and all the power you've lusted after will be mine.
But the strongest indicator of Ascended Astarion being like Cazador lies in his intention to follow in Cazador's footsteps.
Precisely. I'm not ashamed, dear. Cazador's mansion has become my palace and played host to every kind of banquet and soiree and masquerade imaginable. And of course, has seen its fair share of hedonism, clandestine deals, and the occasional disappearance. Whatever it takes to build up my influence over those who matter. Luxury. Sin. All the Baldurian comforts I'm finally free to enjoy.
He intends to be like Cazador, whether he realizes it or not. In a dialogue that draws a comparison between him and Cazador, Astarion says that he is so much better than Cazador was, specifically because he achieved what Cazador could only dream about. Astarion's understanding of being better than Cazador is merely surpassing him in his own game. He is not better in terms of what debauchery Cazador may have committed, because it's very clear Ascended Astarion intends to commit the very same or similar deeds, if not with his own flourish. Conclusion? Based on the abundant evidence, it isn't a stretch to call Astarion Cazador 2.0, Vellioth 3.0, or another abusive Vampire Lord 8.0. In fact, it aligns well with the main concept of the cycle of abuse in Astarion's story. Yes, there are a few grey areas with the rules, and Astarion is not exactly like Cazador, but the story shows us that neither was Cazador exactly like Vellioth. Yet, they all succumbed to the decision that to stop being abused, they needed to become the abuser. That the fear ingrained in them was their only reality, for it was all they had known for so long.
I'll never have to fear you again.
And eventually, they traded an endless hunger that consumed blood with a hunger for power that would soon consume themselves. So that brings this video to an end. If you enjoyed this video, please do subscribe and like to promote it within the YouTube algorithm. And comment what you thought about it. Do you think Ascended Astarion is Cazador 2.0? Does the romance player somehow change this equation or somehow make it worse? Share your thoughts down below.